Hi folks, Simon here, welcome back to the channel. Some new Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade updates for you today. And this is the version of the game, of course, that's coming exclusively to PS5 June 10th this year. And these updates are courtesy of Tetsuya Nomura, who was recently interviewed by Famitsu. But just a brief overview before we get into that. Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is going to be the enhanced version of Final Fantasy VII Remake, but for the PS5, so we'll have improved textures, lighting, and background environments. There's going to be a dedicated photo mode. There's going to be a new difficulty mode, which is an increased difficulty of the classic mode that was in Final Fantasy VII Remake. There's going to be optimized loading times, and of course, there's going to be a new story chapter involving Yuffie. Now, we're going to get into what Nomura said specifically about this new story chapter today. So this translation of the Famitsu interview comes courtesy from Audrey, as always, so thank you for that. Let's go ahead and get into it. The first question was about the new character who we did see in the trailer, and Nomura just addresses his character profile by telling us that Sonon is originally from Wutai, along with Yuffie, and works with Avalanche. He's made to look Asian and wears clothes that resemble that of the army, so he's fitted with armor as well. They wanted the character that balances with Yuffie and be a staff wielder as well. I'm assuming that means gameplay-wise, since, of course, Yuffie uses her shurikens and what have you, her throwing weapons, doesn't she? So it's nice to have perhaps a staff wielder to complement that type of gameplay. And his clothes allow him to move freely. In the beginning, we originally planned for him to be a lithe and extremely attractive man. However, we ended up making him look more manly, since Yuffie is different than what she's like with Cloud Orphans. I'm not sure I understand that bit, sorry. So we thought it would be interesting to see how she interacts with him. Okay, I guess it just means that we already know how Yuffie is going to be interacting with Cloud and Vincent from the original game. So there's just a bit of differences that are going to be involved here with how she interacts with another character we're not yet familiar with. We saw that Yuffie and Sonon can do co-op moves together. We want to explore a bit more of the battle concept. First off, can you explain what those small icons mean next to the ATB gauge? Okay, so we did see in the trailer that the general battle system looks pretty similar to what we got in the original Final Fantasy VII Remake, but of course there are some differences, and this is generally on par for Square when they go ahead and bring out a new game or a new bit of gameplay for a currently released Final Fantasy game. They'll generally iterate on the battle system. We've seen that in many times past, and that's going to be the case here. Incidentally, I suspect when Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 eventually comes out, the battle system will be iterated on even further, especially because we're going to be having different characters that we never got to play with in the original game. Anyway, Nomura answers by saying that since the player can only control Yuffie, okay, you will not be able to control Sonon directly in battles here. You will still get a feel of where Sonon... Is it Sonon or Sonon or Sonon? I honestly don't know. But you'll get a feel of where that person is nearby as well as his movements. There is a mode where Sonon can act on his own, or another mode where he fights when given specific orders by Yuffie. You can switch between these two modes with the L2 button, so that's what the icon means. Right, so you can't control him directly in battles, but you can issue commands. So presumably Sonon will just be fighting by himself, as in like the computer, the AI will be controlling his actions, but you can interfere by throwing orders out to him. So it's a type of system we have seen before, not all that often in the Final Fantasy franchise, but it can work well when it is implemented. So I'm looking forward to getting a feel for the battles in Intergrade here in this specific DLC. Will there be new materia and monsters? Yes, there will be new materia and monsters only available in Yuffie's DLC. Again, something that's always, nice to know. There's going to be new materia and what have you. I'd imagine, of course, because Yuffie's using different weapons, there's going to be different equipment as well to find. And new monsters. Are there plans for DLC after this? And then Nomura answers this final question. For the sake of separating the PS5 upgrade with Yuffie's added parts, we had to call this part DLC. However, we had already decided to create a Final Fantasy VII Remake PS5 version, but we did not want it to mean that we are specifically creating DLC as well. This is interesting. This is interesting. One of the things I didn't like about Final Fantasy 15 was how the DLC content was completely separated from the main game, even though some of the narratives of that DLC would have worked well had it been integrated into the main experience. The only way you could play it was by selecting those episodes as individual, I guess, sessions of gameplay from the main menu. But it sounds like that might not be the case here. Nomura says they're calling it DLC simply to separate it in people's minds, by the sounds of it, from the bulk of the Final Fantasy VII Remake experience. But that is purely a technicality. It sounds like that maybe what Nomura's saying is that the DLC will be implemented into the main game. And that's what I would love to see. We know it's going to be an additional 2 chapters on top of the already existing chapters. So will those chapters simply be maybe tapped on as an epilogue? So once you've completed the game, it will naturally flow into these final 2 chapters. Or maybe they'll take place at some point during the adventure, rather than just simply an option you have to select at the main menu. Okay, as a result, we really have no plans for any other DLC. So this isn't technically DLC in the DLC understanding. This is a new version of the game with that extra content. And with that in mind, they don't then have plans to actually include traditional DLC at a future point. With Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, we are able to adjust to the PS5 environment, which makes for an easy transition to development for the next installment. The roadwork we have laid out to complete the entire story takes priority. And if we are to ever add DLC, it will not be until after everything has been done. Okay, so there we have it. There's no plans for new DLC content for Final Fantasy VII Remake. They really are pushing full steam ahead with the whole project in order to complete the story, and then maybe, not something they're discussing right now, once every game in the series has been released, they might look at releasing some additional DLC content. So I'm actually liking this. We need to, according to Nomura, from what I'm understanding here, we need to separate our traditional understanding of what DLC content is from this additional episode involving Yuffie. It does indeed sound like what Yuffie's going to be, or what this episode's going to be, is an enhanced version of the game that we played on PS4 with these additional story chapters implemented into the game itself. But if that's the way it's going to be implemented, then I will be even happier. But there we have it then, folks. A few more tidbits regarding Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. Have you guys managed to get a PS5 yet so that you can actually play this thing? Don't forget, this is going to be PS5 exclusive. You're not going to be able to play the Yuffie stuff on the PS4. But if you do have the PS4 version of the game, you will be able to upgrade to the PS5 version for free. Although, interestingly, you do have to pay for the Yuffie episode. So, I don't know how that's going to work if it's implemented into the main game, as opposed to just additional DLC, which is selected separately. We'll have to see how it all comes together. Anyway, I do appreciate you folks stopping and sharing your time with me today. Don't forget to subscribe for future Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Till next time, take care.